So I got one response. It says clarity in the midst of chaos. Really, and I think it's quite, yeah. I think our speakers will be, shedding more light on that for us, maybe. So please drop your expectations, really. So maybe the speakers could even touch on them. You have 2 more minutes to go, please. Okay, so we have 2 other responses. Smart ways to achieve set goals without dropping them off. I see someone who relates with me. And then there's how to promote collaboration. Okay, there are more responses. So in spite of many choices in our list of preferences, how do you stay focused and make the right choices? So I think I'll be stopping there. Thank you so much for your responses, really. So my first question would be going to Mr. Abdulmalik. So the question says, how do you define self-leadership? And what are the key components of it?
Thanks, Bismillah. That's actually a very pertinent question for me, because my company is called Honest Management, but the main reason why I called it Honest Management is based on 2 things. The first thing relates to dishonesty in management, but that's a separate discussion. But the reason why I also call it Honest Management is because I believe everybody is a leader within themselves, a leader in terms of leading their own lives. I think deep down, everybody knows what they really want in life. And I think sometimes people are scared to kind of approach that. Sometimes people ask me, how do I really know what I want? I always say to them two things. The first thing I say to them is that, what were you passionate about before you were 10 years old? And they always look at me really strange. And I say, well, because at that point in your life, you're actually closer to who you are. There are not too many things that kind of try and take on to different parts, whether it's in some cultures where your parents say you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, this. And I think reconnecting with that passion before you were 10 years old is really, really important. The second thing as well, I think, relates to the concept of just being honest with yourself. And sometimes I say to people, just spend 10 or 15 minutes a day, just sitting down quiet, thinking about what would really motivate you. There was an interesting study that was done, I'm not sure how long ago it was, but they asked a group of people to say, would you rather spend 10 minutes with your own thoughts, or would you rather have an electric shock? Shockingly, 60% of men said they'd rather have an electric shock. 30% of women said they'd rather have an electric shock rather than be comfortable with their thoughts. But I think if you're talking about self-leadership, the concept self-leadership, i.e., you have to honestly believe that you're here to lead your own life. There's a concept that's used a lot now with Generation Z, and my daughter's just graduated from my master's, this concept of intentional. Basically, if you relate back to the first hadith in Bukhari, actions are only by intentions. So I think sometimes people try and make excuses about where they want to be, but really, you've been given this life, you've been given this amana by Allah. So you really have to say, you can't come to him and say, oh, I had to live this life because of circumstances that I had. I think relating back to yourself, and especially I think as Muslims, saying, I've been given an amana to live my life the best way that I can in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah. And I think when you really relate to that, and also bring in the concept of tawakkul, because nothing's guaranteed, because, okay, I really want to live my life. I really want to have an impact in this amount of people. I really want to spend time with my family. I want to do this because, we don't exist by ourselves. There's 8 billion people already on the planet. So the first relationship is between you and God. The second one is to do with his creation. So you think to yourself, okay, what do I really want to do in terms of self-leadership? First of all, I need to know who I am, why I'm here, and what I want to do to achieve, not just for myself, but people around me. I don't know if that explains a little bit, but that's the concept of honest management. Basically, being honest with yourself to lead the life that you want that will really be self-fulfilling. Thanks.
Jazakallah khairan, sir. Thank you so much for that beautiful explanation or illustration. So, Madam Sister Aisha Remi, please, I'd like to ask you, how do we develop financial intelligence and how do we make informed financial decisions? I'd also like for you to, tell us a bit of what financial intelligence is, kindly.
Okay, so very, very, very interesting concept. Financial intelligence really is just akin to a term that we hear every time, financial literacy. And it's just that ability to, when you're presented with numbers, you're able to make a business sense, out of it, that ability to spot and see financial opportunities. But there are 4 key pillars that holds financial intelligence, and those four key pillars actually helps you to build a very strong foundation. So I will start with just listing them out and then going through one of them one by one. So the first one really is understanding the foundation. And when I mean understanding the foundation, if I ask you as a non-finance person, whether you're running your own personal finance or you're working for someone or you're a CEO, do you understand the interconnectedness between income statements, balance sheet, and cash flow? And by way of experiment, if I was to tell you that, a company that has been adjudged maybe the most profitable company time and time again, came today and said, oh, they were a cash flow trap and they were, filing for bankruptcy tomorrow, would you be able to explain what went wrong with that company? And so that forms the bedrock, even as a non-finance person, to be able to understand the very basic concept of financial statements. What are the components of financial statements? If I ask you today, your income statement, what makes up your income statement? What makes up your balance sheet? What is the concept of cash flow? Can you explain that to me? I mean, in a very layman language without being an expert. So a lot of times we sit with people and they ask questions. They ask a lot of questions around these 3 key items. And what you tell them is that there are a lot of resources online. You can either talk to an expert, you can join a community, you can read books on personal finances, because it's interesting that every single aspect of your life is wrapped around quantitative or non-quantitative data that you use every day to make, financial decisions. So the other part is understanding the acts. When you hear finance and accounting, it's actually a combination of science and acts, really. And there are a lot of assumptions, principles and rules that are going on at the background to make, things that are non-quantitative to be presented in numbers that you can actually, make sense of. So when you understand that technical bit of it also, I mean, not too technical, but if I give you an income statement, you understand the basic knowledge of revenue, expenses, and, profit or loss, that sums it up. Because then you can start to ask the right question as to why is it a revenue? Why is it an expense? Why is it termed profit? So the first point I've spoken about, having a basic foundation. If you want to be financially intelligent, you must have a basic foundation of what is required to understand the components of financial statements. The other part, the second point that I touched on, is understanding the act. Just understanding the fact that there are some rules, principles that are going behind some of the things that are non-quantitative, but they've been represented by numbers that you're trying to understand. There are a lot of rules behind it. And sometimes I can give you an example. You sit with business managers and you're trying to explain the concept of accrual. If anybody has heard the concept of accrual, and you have to explain the fact that I can sell you something, not collect money, but I must record it in my financial reports. That whole concept is just always difficult. So there are technical rules, regulations are behind the numbers that you see. The other third bit is understanding the analysis. So by the time you understand the foundation, you understand that there are principles and rules that are guiding a lot of the things are not numbers, but are presented as numbers to you. Then understanding the analysis, you pick a non-quantitative data, a quantitative data, look at your environment, listen to what somebody is saying to you, and you're trying to combine that into things you call maybe ratios. You're looking at calculations and trying to make sense of the number, aggregating the numbers to say, oh, if I had 2 + 2, why does he give me a 4? Or even if he gives me a 4, what does that mean to me? The other part is the very critical piece that I tell people to hold on to is understanding the big picture. The big picture in the sense that you're looking at, you're looking at beyond the numbers. The numbers do not tell the complete story. It will never tell you the complete story. You see numbers and they don't tell you the complete story. So what you then need to do is to bring a broader perspective to whatever you've been presented to. So do you understand the macro factors that are happening to you? If CBN say to you today that they are increasing interest rates, what does that mean to the economy? And what does that mean to your own pocket, either as a person, or what does it mean to your business as a business owner, or what does it even mean to your employer if you're working for somebody? People have gone on about the impact of COVID. How has it impacted you in numbers? What does changes in government policy says? Nigerian government is borrowing. How does that impact you? And those are all the things that you need to build together to then say, before I make financial decisions, I understand, the basic foundation of what it means to be financially savvy. I understand that there are a lot of rules and regulation going behind the numbers that I see being aggregated. I can do basic analysis. Somebody comes and pitch a business to me, or they want me to be a part of a solution. What does it mean to me in numbers terms? I understand the bigger picture. And so a lot of times I tell people, YouTube is there. You have a lot of experts that you can speak to now. You can join communities. If you don't have this basic knowledge, it's difficult to be able to sit with you and say, we're trying to help you, review a business, or we're trying to help you to make sense of the numbers. That basic foundation, you must have it. And it's just solely based on these 4 pillars. And when you have this, a lot of times when you're investing, when you're doing analysis, you're not doing it with your eyes, you're doing it with your mind and, the basic common sense with that financially savvy knowledge that you have. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, it does, Ma. And I feel like it got a little bit technical because it's in financial terms and so.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of times people want to run away from the technical bit of finance, but you see that everything you do that revolves around financial decision making in every aspect of your life, their basic understanding of finance or accounting that must come in. You can't run away from it. You must understand the language of money. And if you must understand the language of money, you must understand how it's recorded, how it's analyzed, and how it can help you make informed decisions. It's easy a lot of times, if you look at, I think in the last 6 months, if you've been following the news, the scams, the Ponzi scheme scams that have been recorded, in billions of naira are just not quantifiable. If somebody comes to you today and say, I have an investment that pays 50% in a month, lack of your financial literacy is what make you believe that you actually have an investment that would return 50% in a month without asking the necessary questions. So at the end of the day, no matter how you want to run away from the technical bit of it, there's some basic understanding, finance knowledge that you must have to help you ask the right question. But people don't want to get into that. So it's not really going into the technical bit, but the basic knowledge that would help you to ask the right question. You must have that understanding. And so it's either you're reading books on personal finances, it's either you're speaking to an expert, it's either as a business owner, you have a finance manager or a very good accountant close to you that can help you read both the quantitative and the non-quantitative data that you are collecting and with you every day. You must have that in your circle. But if you don't, it's likely that you're going to fall into the kind of scams that we see is still running, that we've seen in the past years, and will continue to come in more sophisticated and structured way, to window dress collecting your money without you understanding what you're doing. So that knowledge must come. You must have it. No matter how basic as it is, you must have it to be able to ask the right questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that elaborate response. So, Mr. Abdulmalik, please, would like for you to tell us, how do we stay motivated how do we stay motivated on our goals when faced with obstacles?
Good question. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think, well, that's the most important thing. I think it all depends on the intention of what you're trying to do. So sometimes, of course, there's definitely going to be challenges, whatever you're doing. But I think if you really believe in what you're trying to do, that in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, he has like these, I think, 13 concepts of success. And one of them is called perseverance. In fact, what I liked about that chapter on perseverance is that he uses as his key example for perseverance the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the exemplar of perseverance. So if we're modeling on him, because Micah is cultural awareness, and I think everything has to relate to basically our religion. I think that's how you get centered in life. So if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, knowing that he was the prophet of Allah and knew what he was trying to do and didn't deter him from what he was trying to do. So try and break that down into where you are in your life in terms of your little goals as what you're trying to achieve. If they're really centered on something in terms of your relationship with Allah and with his creation, whether it's to do with a business or whether you're working a job, and I think that would be the motivating force for you to persevere in what you're trying to do. That's my example. And that's my experience. So sometimes, of course, I've had different goals and challenging goals. Like about 12 years ago, I moved to Cape Town to open up a cafe. It was definitely difficult. First 3 or 4 months, you can almost count the customers that are coming in there. But I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I'm going to persevere with doing it. And then after a while, it turned around. After about, I think, 11 months, we broke even because of getting a lot of media attention. But I think the concept, what I learned from that, even though I did not really make any money from the cafe, was I got other experiences. I got to meet lots of different people. I got life experiences, life lessons that are still a part of my life today. Sometimes I think people think that a goal is something that has an end, but sometimes I think about a goal as a journey. Sometimes there is no end. And I think sometimes we get motivated. I don't want to say Western concepts about a goal. If you look at a game of football, for example, the goal is actually to score goals. That's how you win the game. But sometimes think about the journey, think about the game, think about where you are in life, think about what you're trying to achieve. Because there might be things when you're actually going for your goal in that journey, you might discover more things about yourself, or you might want to even realign. You might actually find even getting to the goal will not be that fulfilling for you. And that's at the end of the day, what we're trying to look for is spiritual fulfillment. So in summary, I always think that whatever you're trying to do with any of your goals, you should align that with your spiritual fulfillment, relate that to your relationship with Allah and following the Sunnah. And I think if you keep that in your heart and mind and keep on persevering, then you will not be disappointed.
Thank you so much, sir, for that response. I was going to ask one question, but I think I'll just wait till after the session. Sister Aisha, please. I'd like you to answer. How do you balance short-term and long-term goals in your personal and your professional life?
Okay. So I'll start by saying that long-term goals actually are what I would term a desired destination. And I'm going to answer that question using a very simple analogy. So assuming that you have a car and you're going to move from point A to point B. The point B, you're quite aware of where you're going, right? But you have to drive the car through total darkness. There's no light, there's nothing. You have to drive the car through total darkness. What you see is that if your headlights are functioning, right, you turn on your headlights and they can only see maybe the total distance that you're supposed to cover is about 100 kilometers. When you turn on your headlights, they can only see maybe as far as 50 meters. But as far as they can see, they can help you prevent obstacles. You prevent potholes, you prevent, maybe colliding with coming vehicles and all. So in this case, I would take the point B as your goal, right? And the headlights that's your long-term goal. And then the headlights are your short-term goals. So within that long-term goals, you put in your short-term planning that will take you step by step to your desired destination. Within this concept, right, I will break it into two categories of people. So the first category, and then you can tell me in the two categories, which one do you think is the worst category? So the first category is the people who know their desired destination. That's a point B, which is the long-term goal in this case, right? And so what they've clearly done is they don't turn on their headlights. They just prefer to drive through that total darkness. And what would happen in that case is that maybe they fall into potholes, they collude with coming vehicles. There's so many obstacles they have to deal with in that total darkness. And eventually they crash the car or destroy the car in such a way that they can't get to their point B, which is the desired destination. The second category of people is that they get onto the road. They don't have any desired destination. There's no long-term goal. They just want to keep going. And they actually have short-term plans, right? They turn on their headlights, they cover 50 meters, the headlight is still on, takes them to another 50 meters. At some point, they're going to get frustrated, and then they will say, where am I headed? Where am I even at? Because in the first point, they didn't have a desired destination. And that for me sums up, trying to balance your short-term goal and your long-term goal. At every point in time, you must know your bigger picture, the end in mind. I'll give you an example. Towards last year, I did make up my mind that 2023, I wanted to improve, and I wanted to improve the understanding of the D. And what I tried to do was I went online trying to check for classes, Islamic classes that could take me on fiqh and some of the aspects of the things I wanted to cover. And I got a class. The first week that I attended, it was supposed to be a Saturday and a Sunday class. And then I attended the Saturday class. I was excited. The Sunday class, my Malim gave me assignments. And I was like, oh. And then Monday to Friday ran through. I couldn't even take a look at the assignment. And Saturday, I had a well-prepared speech on how I was going to tell my Malim that, I'm working in financial services. It's end of the year for me. I will have to do audits. I can no longer continue this program. I don't want to do again. And my Malim allowed me to, carefully, say out my speech. And then, the way he was able to break everything down to say, see, you have a long-term goal, but it's as if you're already pushing all of the things that you need to achieve in like a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years into this 1 week already. When you take it step by step, you will achieve your goal. You don't need to be too hard on yourself. So what do you want to track? Okay, so first, what do you want to learn? How do you want to learn it? What are the step-by-step achievements that you have put in place to say, I am on track? And you don't need to, don't overwhelm yourself with trying to take all of these things in. The week that you are not able to present yourself for the class, let me know. We would adjust to your calendar. If it's one surah that you want to learn, if one verse of that surah is what you can learn in a month, it's fine. I'm happy with that. And trust me, we've run for a month now. I've learned a full surah. I've I used to be very clumsy with surah to kafirun. Somehow when I get in between surah to kafirun, I just miss some few points. I have clarity as to how to recite surah to kafirun. And at the end of the day, I stepped back and said, I mean, this is a lifelong journey. I have a goal, right? But in between those goals, I have what I'm tracking now. So there's no way you can go to your long-term goals without putting the short-term, your headlights. You have a desired destination, your headlights are off. You don't have a desired destination, but you turn on your headlights and you keep going. None of that is going to balance out. So you must understand where you're going. You must understand the short term, the milestones that you're going to put to track your progress. You must also understand what we call landmines. Landmines are triggers. So if, for instance, the first week I had a trigger. I had a trigger because I felt that I was taking on too much, and with my work schedule, I might not be able to cope. But that trigger was then dosed by my Malim to say, hey, yes, we have a trigger, but we can actually plan on how to spread out, this work schedule so that it doesn't get too overwhelming for you. So that short-term, long-term goal must be balanced out. If you take your car and you're moving into a destination, your headlights must be on and you must be clear about where you're going. So I'll say that's the best analogy that I can use to explain how to balance out your short-term and long-term goals.
Well, that makes so much sense, Ma. Especially because in today's world, I know that we as youths, we are always so eager to attain a goal. We don't actually spread them out, like you said. But I'd like Mr. Abdulmalik to comment, if you'd like to, on that same question.
Okay. Well, I think Aisha explained it quite well. But what I would say is that if you look at it from a personal development perspective, where short-term goals, sometimes people try and do too much. They say, I want to do this in a particular time. Earlier on when you were introducing me, you talked about me having a goal of impacting 1 million people in 5 years. I've got 3 years left because I made that goal in 2020. But I think it relates to also relates to the concept of the journey and also why you want to do something. So when let's say if I have a 5-year goal, what am I doing in those 5 years? I'm not just waiting for the 5th year. It means I have to start doing things or speaking to people about who have similar aspirations as well. And from my experience as well, again, what I've experienced is that when you have those kind of goals, then Allah just starts putting people in your path that actually want to help you. It's like you start the journey and don't get too addicted or too passionate to, this is the way I'm going to do it. This is the only way I'm going to do it. No, just say, okay, this is the goal. This is what I want to do. How I get there, you have to build flexibility into that. So one of the things that happened when I started on that goal was, I got headhunted to be a director of a think tank in Saudi. And I was in charge of basically doing thought leadership. So what I wanted to do was say, okay, how can I sensitize the world about different things? And one of the things that I did, I don't know how effective it is anyway, is that I worked with a consultancy to release a global infectious diseases index. So this index basically tells every country in the world what are the most prevalent infectious diseases in your country and what you should do about it. Now, I don't know if the ideal audience for that is the Ministries of Health and Investment, because I'm telling you, this is the most prevalent disease in your country. You should do something about it if you really care about your people. Now, if anybody's using it, I don't know. But that was one of the things I thought, okay, let me give that information to Ministers of Health so they know how to allocate finance to help people in their country. Now, if every Minister of Health uses that data, hopefully I already impact 1 million people by far easily. If you look at Nigeria, the top, just out of curiosity, the top infectious diseases in the world are actually TB, malaria, HIV. But what will shock you is that diarrheal diseases and pneumonia are actually the two, they actually kill more than TB and malaria. Well, they kill more than malaria, sorry. TB is the most effective. But if you get even a rich country like Denmark, if you look at the top 10 diseases that kills people is pneumonia. So things like that. So what I'm saying is that when you start working on this goal, just start that journey. Don't get too, bogged down on the details. Just say, this is what I want to do. This is my intention. Ask others to help you. Start that journey. And if your intention is correct, and at the end of the day, everything is in his hand. That's why we talked about because of tawakkul. If you don't reach the goal, you don't reach the goal. As I said, action not only by intentions. If I still get the reward for impacting 10 people, doesn't matter. But I'm not obsessed about the 1 million goal. I think that helps. Just to add to what Aisha said, because I really love that analogy. Right.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, sir. And I feel like we created a good atmosphere for the next question. And Mr. Abdulmalik, I'd like for you to answer that question. So the question says, how do you prioritize and manage your time to achieve your goals?
Okay, thanks. So I think that relates to what is your priority in life. So sometimes people say, let me give you an example. I was asked a similar question once when I had to address, like, I think 100,000 kids in India about 2 years ago. And I said, if you say that your priority is family, for example, let's say you just got married, you're about to have kids, and so yeah, but I really want to make a future better for my children, so I need to work like 20 hours a day. I'm sorry, your priorities are your family. You can't get that balance. We now know from studies that the most important years of the child is the first 7 years. I think that's a good capture in the hadith. That first 7 years, no matter what you do, that's the most important part of building a relationship with your child. After that, in fact, I think even in, I'm not sure if it was captured in one of Al-Ghazali's books, but as a child gets to 12 years old, your influence as a parent reduces by 75%. So you now have 3 other competing factors: the society that they live in, their friends, and also their personality traits begin to kick in. So your influence as a parent after 7 years diminishes by 75%. So when people say, oh, my priority is my family, I want to build a relationship with my children, but I need to work extra long hours for the first 10 years of their life, by the time they get to teenagers, I'm sorry, it's over. Your priority was not your child at the beginning, because that's the most important thing. So sometimes, you just have to be a bit hard on yourself. If your priority is your child or your family, you need to prioritize that at the beginning, no matter what. So in terms of your priority, your goals, if you're really sincere about what your priorities are, then you need to make that as a priority in everything you do and everything you say. So for example, just break it down to little things like, because I work mainly in the West. So we have challenges, whether it's to do with Ramadan, it's to do with fasting, to do with Ramadan, to do with your prayers, of course. So sometimes, you might be called into a meeting. And this is I want to give you real life examples. You're called into a meeting, you get there first, and you're like, okay, especially in the winter in Europe, Dura and Asr is 2 hours. You get to the meeting on time, and everybody comes in like 10 or 15 minutes late. And you're thinking, oh my God, I've only got like 20 minutes to do my Asr. So after a while, what I learned was like, okay, they turn up 10 to 15 minutes late, or someone's going on a toilet break. My toilet break is my prayer time. I just say, oh, I've got to go out. No one knows where I'm going, but my priority is I need to do my prayers on time. So I don't care what's happening. I will turn up 10 minutes late, or I'll leave halfway through the meeting for 10 or 15 minutes. Just equate it with someone goes for a toilet break. So just to break down, what I mean is that if your priority, you need to stick down to your priority on what's really, really important. And in terms of relates to your end goal, maybe take it for what Sister Aisha was saying. If your end goal is basically you were put here to worship Allah, that's your main focus in life, make Him and the religion your priority, and everything else will have to fall in place. Will have to fall in place no matter what. So that's how I try and approach life. But I can only give you real life examples from what I experienced. I hope that helps.
Okay, so I wanted to state something. I know we've talked about, spreading out our goals, but I know in times now, people try to put time into their goals. I want to achieve this within 2 months or the next 3 months and all of that. Do you think that is quite realistic?
Yeah, I do that. So I said, okay, I want to impact 1 million people by 5 years. So if you go again, looking at one of the book, I want to quote this book again, Napoleon Hill's book, where it's the Think and Grow Rich. One of the things he mentioned about putting a time is that it gives us time frame in your mind. Like, okay, because if you have a goal, you can't just say, oh, I want to do this by this particular time, or I want to learn more hadith. No, you got to put a goal. I want to learn more hadith, or I want to learn more surah by this particular goal. Because also it makes it more intentional, and also it kind of like, I don't want to say use the word trap, but it kind of like puts you into a box of how you think. And also, again, relate that back to the Quran and the Sunnah. For example, when one of the examples I used was when Prophet Zechariah was saying that he wanted to have someone to inherit after him. And he could easily have just said, no, Allah knows what I want. But he specifically asked, I want someone to inherit after me. And when you use that kind of concept, you're saying basically someone that's going to be here before I pass away. So that is a timed thing where he was asking Allah for a particular time. And there's nothing wrong with saying in your dua or saying, oh, Allah, can I have this by this particular time? But at the end of the day, I put it into your hand. So I really believe in the concept of having time goals, because if not, it's too fluid. And if you don't, it's all to do with your commitment. Why does Allah say, why are the prayer times between a specific goal? You've got to do 5 prayers. He didn't say just do 5 prayers in a day. He said, no, do 5 prayers in a day, but a particular time. I believe it's the concept of time management and having a specific goal to do things that need to be done at a particular time. So I really believe in the concept of timing your goals, not let's making them a fluid goal.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Abdulmalik. Sister Aisha, would you like to jump in on that question as well?
So, I mean, it's a very interesting question. First, what I say to people is, when you're setting goals, do you have an idea of what's in which category does your goal falls? And so for me, from the top of my mind, I know there are things around health, there are things around relationship and spirituality, there are things around personal development, there is experience, there is career, and there's wealth. In that bucket, you can also put finance. The first 3 for me, which has to do with your health, your spirituality, and your personal development, comes from a point of deep sense of reflection, and they're almost like very internal to you. The last thing that has to do with experience, career, wealth, and finance are more too external. So when people are setting goals, you want to understand from which of the point are they coming from. Is it the one that is external or the one that is internal? When it's internal, it's almost a top priority for you. I mean, there are things that has to do with your well-being. Your spirituality is a total you. So things that has to do with a total you, a productive you, health, wellness, and those are the things that can help you function and then relates to the external part of the goals that you're looking to set in that area. So when I tell people, when I have conversations with people, I tell them within the internal category, which seems to be key priority, are you going to say, within this quarter, I want to improve my understanding of the deen? I want to improve my understanding of the deen, you put a quarter to it. When you pick that and then trying to add on 2, 3, 4, 5 other categories to it might be too much. And then that's where you break down not being able to achieve, irrespective of the time that you have, you simply cannot achieve because you're trying to put too many goals together. So 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 3 max, I tell people. 1 from the internal side, which is more a deep reflection of you, a total you, and maybe 1 from the external side. And so when you do that, then the point of then, being able to lay it out, structure it in such a way that, yes, there's a timing to it. You must put a timing to it, because guess what? The mind is a very powerful tool, very powerful tool. If you say that, I want to save, I'm going to save this year, you probably will end up saving something. But if you say to yourself that I want to save 2 million by the end of 2023, and this is how I'm going to achieve my 2 million savings, that already sticks in your mind. If you say that every month I have to save 50,000 to help me make up my 2 million, if you have any inflow for that month, there's a way your mind will tweak you to reminding that you have a target for the end of the year. And that is because you have put a time to it, you've put a structure to it, and you've put a way to track your progress. So in between these internal, external categories, I try not to lump up too many things to help me manage the time that I allocate to any of the category that I've chosen, both from the internal and the external one, and being able to track progress. And again, as Brother Abdulmalik has mentioned, dua, everything is also dependent on Allah. You must consistently pray. But if you're praying without the hard work, question mark. So prayer and then the hard work. So for me, that's how I try to structure, putting those goals, putting a time in, and ensuring that I'm able to track, track the progress.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Sister Aisha. In order not to waste any more of our time, we have about 13 minutes more for the session. So I'd like to ask you, how do you stay accountable to yourself and others in achieving your goals and building your self-leadership skills? That's the Sister Aisha first. I don't know if you got the question.
Yes, you asked how to stay accountable, right?
Yes. To yourself.
And also build leadership skills.
Yes.
Okay, so I think the first thing is, I don't know if anybody followed the news of the New Zealand, Prime Minister that resigned during the week. And I don't know if you were able to pick one or two words that she had used. I think the one that was fascinating to me was where she said her tank was full and then there was no reserve to, use to serve anymore. I think at every point in life, we must have a functional relationship with ourselves. A functional relationship to the extent of having a high degree of self-awareness. And so, Brother Abdulmalik has spoken about self-leadership. I think the way, in addition to what he has said, the way I kind of want to structure it is to say that number one is the fact that you can't lead others if you have not led yourself. And then there's some couple of articles I've read where they have mentioned that when you're actually leading people, 50% of the time you're actually leading yourself. And when you're leading yourself, you're sort of building internal architecture that acts as a compass that helps you to identify your core values. These are all the things that works together that helps you to lead others. One experiment that I tell people is, for every time that you've ever interacted with a leader, you've spoken to, you've been in the space of somebody that in your own words or within your own criteria, you've assumed that this person is a good leader. What was that single thing that you did admire about them? So you can hold that. I also tell people, if you get yourself in a plane and then for some reason or the other, the oxygen mask comes down, are you going to rush to help people, or you're going to put your own oxygen mask first, and then you have the right amount of oxygen to then be able to help others? The other bit is when you put all of this together, you actually find out that you're building your self-leadership skills while not just leading yourself, but also leading other people. There are three key things that I hold that for me will work for you to be able to hold yourself accountable and for you to be able to, possess the right, set of self-leadership skills. The first one, like I said, is self-awareness. Self-awareness is very key to self-mastery, knowing yourself, who you are. Another experiment that you can do is there anybody you've ever worked with, whether your friend, your line manager at work, your co-founder or business partner, and there are particular traits that they've exhibited that you don't like? On a scale of 1 to 5, can you rate yourself, based on that trait that you've seen in them? Rate yourself and don't try to make justification. Don't say, yeah, okay, well, maybe your co-partner or your team member or your line manager doesn't give out information and you don't like that aspect of him. Don't come and say, yeah, I don't give out information because maybe they don't deserve it. Don't make any justification. Just from a character trait check, ask yourself, this thing that you don't like about this leader or somebody in that leadership role, what is it about me as well? Where can I put myself? When you do that, the second bit is the self-reflection. You are intuitively asking, challenging yourself. How can I be a better person? How can I be a better person? What were the events that happened? How did I respond? How was I able to control my reaction? And the last part for me is regulation. When you're able to regulate, it's a very vital key for self-control. On a scale of a lot of times when things happen, ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how is this life threatening? Or how does this impact my life goals? If is on a 10, maybe you were supposed to get a report that would have helped you to speak well in a meeting and your direct reports didn't. You got to the meeting on that morning and it says, oh, I'm sorry, something went off with my computer, I couldn't complete the report. And everybody's already waiting for you to do your presentation. How do you react? And that is where the self-regulation comes in. If it's on a scale of 10, it's life-threatening, then you really have to engage. But if it's most of the time, issues are always between a scale of 2 to 3. And so when you bring in all those self-awareness, self-reflection, self-regulation, it helps you build that functional relationship with yourself. And a lot of times you find yourself holding yourself accountable because then that becomes an inner architecture to how you also react and deal with other people. And I say for me, those are the 3 key things that I try to hold dearly in challenging myself every day, holding myself accountable, and also, if I find myself in any leadership position, I ensure that I hold those 3 key things.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Abdulmalik, could you please jump in on that question too?
Yeah, so I already spoke earlier on about leadership, and I think the pointers that Aisha gave you are actually very pertinent. So I wouldn't necessarily add to that. The only thing I'll add is that basically, so I do give leadership and management training to senior officials. And I did that when I was working for the UN. And when people talk about particular terminology, I always like to go back to the origin of the word. So the origin of the word leadership actually comes from 2 languages, Arabic and English, actually. So the word leader comes from an Arabic word that relates to rope. So a rope is like something you tie to something and then you pull it, basically. And leadership comes actually from ship. So it means, in summary, leadership means to lead people on a journey. That's basically the origin of the word. And I always like to defer. My concept of leadership relates back to the concept, the hadith of the Prophet, where he says, on a journey, a leader is the servant of the people. I can't think of any better explanation than that. And in fact, there was a British managerial guru that actually wrote a book on leadership. And again, he used the Prophet Muhammad SAW as the exemplar of a true leader. He talked about his life as a Bedouin, and also going back to the concept of him being a shepherd. If you know some of the history of the prophets, a lot of the prophets were actually shepherds briefly. The reason why they had to go through that was a concept of being patient, which is a very important part of leadership, and also caring for people, caring for the whole flock. So if you look at some of the journeys and the histories of some of the prophets, and of course, Prophet Muhammad SAW, you see that he was sent on caravans, and because they trusted him, he used to be the leader of that caravan because they trusted him to basically take care of everybody. So going back to that concept of the word leadership means that you're basically going on a journey where you're also leading people and you prioritize them over yourself. So there are many books that are written about leadership. Some that I like to talk about concepts of leadership and basically being competent, because deep down, nobody respects anybody that's not competent. That's one of the worst things you see in a job. Someone is telling you to do something they actually don't understand themselves. Obviously, a leader has to be honest. They have to be fair. They don't want to promote the concept of favoritism because that divides the team. Also, a leader should definitely be looking at the concept of promoting other leaders. Real leaders don't think about themselves being leaders forever. They're very aware that they can do something for a brief period, and after a while, they need to leave. And again, what Sister Aisha mentioned about the former Prime Minister of New Zealand saying, okay, I've reached my tether, now I'm ready to go, I'm done, basically. Most leaders in the world sadly don't do that. They want to stay on forever. So I think if you take those 7 components, going back to that concept of self-leadership, and for me, that's why the concept of, when I say honest management, means being honest with yourself. If you can't be honest with yourself, how are you going to be honest with other people? Honest about what you want to do. And I love what Sister Aisha mentioned about self-awareness. In fact, that's the most important thing. Self-awareness, self-consciousness. You're actually, as you're becoming a leader, you're learning a lot more about yourself, about how much you actually subscribe to the concept of integrity. And also there's a famous Roman word that says the jewel of leadership is integrity. That's the most important part of it, being a leader, integrity. Because deep down, everybody wants to be respectful that they want to be with. I mean, they have certain things that have happened in recent history, political history recently, but usually people don't like to be lied to. No one loves being lied to. So I don't understand it. I've never met anybody that says, oh, I like to be lied to by my leader. So that concept of integrity being the jewel of leadership. So all relates back to all these concepts, bring all these concepts together and say, okay, in terms of self-leadership, where do I really sincerely want to go to? In terms of checks and balances, there are lots of things that people have said. So if you want to put a check on your leadership, it's good to have an honest person to be by your side, or an honest friend. This is, okay, these are my goals. This is what I'm trying to do. Can you honestly criticize me where I am or where I'm not going, for example? And for you, if you're really honest, you actually respect if they criticize you and not take that as a criticism. Say, okay, how can I benefit myself from this criticism? You know, it goes back to some of the leaders that we've seen, whether it's in sports, especially the concept of fixed mindset and growth mindset. So growth mindset people are always trying to find out where they're falling short and how they can improve themselves over and over again. So those are one of the things I just wanted to share with you, but I think also Sister Aisha captured a lot of things about yourself.
Jazakallah khairan to the both of you. I'd like to state that to the audience that you can please type in your questions in the chat box, and we'll be responding to them soon, inshallah. So Mr. Abdulmalik, I know we've talked about setting goals and setting times to our goals as well, but this question talks about how do we evaluate our progress towards our goals, and how do we measure success?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I already touched a little bit on that earlier on in terms of, you know, so the concept of measuring success. I think if you look at whatever you're doing on the goal as seeing it as a journey, and don't get bogged down too much about the success criteria that you might have thought was a success criteria for yourself. You know, going back to the concept of, you know, an ant doesn't really appreciate the beauty of, you know, an Iranian Persian carpet, for example. So you start on that journey, but you can never see the thing. If you're above the carpet, then you can see the intricacies and the beauty of the journey. But that ant on that carpet can actually see the journey ahead of itself. So you start that journey, and that's why it's very important to root yourself in your faith, that everything belongs to Allah. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try. There's no, people say inshallah. Sadly, in some parts of the world, we say inshallah, it doesn't really mean anything. And I remember when someone said, it was a non-Muslim, I said to them, not inshallah. And she said to me, oh, but I've heard that in this part of the world, because I live in the Middle East, that doesn't mean anything. I said, well, actually, that's not true. So I explained to her what inshallah actually really means. And she said, oh, okay, I never thought about it like that. So inshallah is like, you know, again, go back, put in the hadith, tie your horse, then say inshallah. Don't say inshallah and then don't tie your horse. So you gotta take certain steps. And again, going back to the concept of being intentional, or whether it's being used now, action only by intentions. So this is what I really want to achieve in my life. And Allah help me to achieve that. It will be beneficial for my present life, my future life, and my life in the hereafter. That's the most important thing. I'm not getting bogged down, oh, my success criteria was I had to make $1 million by the time I'm 30 years old. Is that going to really help you in any way? No. So I think the most important thing with success criteria is, yeah, definitely have success criteria, have goals you want to achieve, but also building flexibility that Allah knows what's best for you. And if anything happens in your path, it might be a blessing for you, and accepting that in your heart, and then moving ahead like that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I wanted to just briefly attend. Perhaps Sister Aisha can add to that as well.
Okay, Sister Aisha, would you like to?
Yeah, I think the two key things I want to add to that is first is the concept of vanity metrics. So usually there's a saying that says that you can't manage what you can't measure, and you won't know if you're successful except you've defined what the success means to you. And if you can't measure it as well, you may not be able to improve it. And so there's this concept of vanity metrics, and I will put it in a way to say, assuming that you were a business owner or you were just somebody who came up with an idea, and then you set up a website and say, I want people to visit the website. And today you come and say, oh, I have 10 people visit the website. What does that mean? So when the concept of vanity metrics kicks in is that we're quite vague in the way we define what success means. So when I say 10 people visited the website, I'm not asking questions around what did they click, why are they clicking it, what were they looking for? But I've just suddenly threw out the numbers and say, I just need to know the number of visits to the website. What is that going to answer? So if you take back to, any example that you can bring in, in ensuring that we want to measure success, we must not use vanity metrics, because usually they are vague, they're general, and it doesn't tell you anything. So for as long as you have a goal, you must define what success means to you and how you want to track it, not with the use of vanity metrics. The other point is, oftentimes I have graduate trainees come through, our organization, and I try to sit with them and then, just try to have a sense of what is their plan in the next 3 to 5 years, what does success means to them and all of that. And a very intriguing thing that I've, consistently met with everyone I speak to in the program is that they talk about success only. Nobody talks about failure. And I feel like we don't talk about failure the way we should. There's a concept of failing forward. Yes, you failed, but did you learn from it? But when you talk to people, the only thing that they can keep in their mind is success. I'll give you an example. About 2 weeks ago, I spoke with a guy and he said, I've always, from my grad days, I've always wanted to work with the four, that's Deloitte, KPMG, the first 4. And because he applied once, he went through the interview and they rejected him, and that was it. And I said, okay, that is it for you. He said, that is it. And I said, have you taken time to speak with people that you think jumped to the success that you see today? Have you taken time to sit with them and have a sense of the failed experiments they've gone through before they get to where they are today? And he said, no. And I think that oftentimes, when we speak to people, when we put in, success and put in our metrics, we must also understand the concept of failing forward. It's not every time that, things will turn out the way you want it. So those two key things for me: vanity metrics, avoid the use of vanity metrics, and also understand that concept of failing forward.
That was really beautiful. Thank you so much. Since I do not see any questions yet, I think I'll just proceed with the questions I have here, pending we receive questions from the audience. Okay, so Sister Aisha, just could you tell us how we could invest and grow our wealth for the long term in the halal way?
Okay, first, I think the first thing to note is that when you talk about halal investing, you're simply just describing investments that are Sharia compliant. And as it is, we understand that when you're talking about halal, there are a lot of do's and don'ts, from ensuring that you're not investing in businesses that are not permitted, according to Sharia, but the involvement of the people that you're dealing with. So the starting point for me, as with also conventional investments, right, is understanding your investment style. Investment style within the concept of knowing what your risk tolerance is, what is your risk appetite. That's how much of risk can you take? Are you a risk averse person? What is your time horizon? You must understand your time horizon. You must understand your liquidity needs. You must understand what your returns expectations are. You must understand where you are in your phase of life. If you are, I mean, an investment style for a 25-year-old, person who is just starting out in their career would definitely not be the same with somebody who is 50 or 55 and almost close to ending their career. So you must understand the age and phase you are in life. You must understand the concept of diversification. There are different, consideration. And when you bring all of this together, there's something called the investment policy statement. That investment policy statement just simply sums up all your understanding, your criteria for investment, and everything around your investment style in one single place. There are types of investments. You have so many halal investment options. Prior to this time, we used to be very restricted, and because in this part of the world, a lot of the conversations around financial services are conventional, financial products. But you're starting to see a lot more Islamic banks. You're starting to see a lot more Islamic mutual funds. You're starting to see a lot more Islamic, products. So I'll just list out some of the options that I feel have, that you can see in Nigeria today, and you can also see offshore, if you want to go the halal way. So first is the halal stocks. So, and again, any company or anybody that I mentioned here, this is not a paid advertisement. There are people that I've seen, based on what I do in the industry or what I've seen on social media. So halal stocks, I know that Lotus Capital does ETFs. ETFs is like, they call it exchange traded fund, where it's like you taking a bucket and pulling different type of stocks inside. And what it does is it gives you access to, different industry within the trading flow. So I know that if, for instance, within your investment style, don't forget the starting point is understanding your investment style. And within that bracket, you know what your risk appetite is. You've understood for what period are you investing for, 1 year, 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. You also understand your liquidity needs. Every 2 to 3 months, I need money to pay for my child's school fees. Every year, I need to pay my annual rent. Every half year, I need to, wardrobe. I need to change my wardrobe. You must understand your liquidity needs. The other thing is, what is your return expectation? I want to make this out of the money that I'm investing. And don't forget, because it's halal doesn't mean you can't make money. Sometimes when you speak to people, they say, well, boy, it's halal now. People are not allowed to make money. I'm like, no. What's the basic principle is the profit and loss sharing principle. So if we make a profit, we make it together. And if we invest, if it's a loss, then, it's a loss. So back to the types of investment options. I've spoken about ETFs, Lotus Capital. And there's also a website and an app that I've seen recently that help you scout both locally and globally for halal stock. They screen and then tell you stocks that have actually gone through certain criteria, and you can actually invest in them as a Muslim. So it's not every company you can invest in. Companies that are doing alcohol, definitely not. Prostitution, selling pork, you can't do all of that. But there are some certain criteria that Muslim scholars have sat down to say, if this company, though it's not a Muslim company, but if they tick this checklist, then you can actually invest in them. So they call them halal stock. So there's this app, Islamically, that helps you scan both locally and globally for halal stocks that you can invest in. There's also mutual funds. You can also invest in mutual funds. I know Lotus Capital also does that. There's also another app called Zoya. Yeah, so what they do is they have over 2,500 ETFs and mutual funds that you can actually use to check for halal mutual funds. So both if you're investing globally or locally. Then the common one we have here is sukuk. I'm sure that we've heard sukuk over and over again. So you can invest in sukuk. And then the other one is real estate. You can actually structure ijara products around real estate, rent to own. I'm sure that we're very familiar with the housing deficits in Nigeria. So if you can partner with, if you have, you can put a good pitch together, you can structure ijara products, which is the rent to own, where you have an apartment, very you are able to rent out, get a portion of your rent, and then whoever your tenant is also paying a purchase portion down, and at the end of the day they become the owner of the property. It's called ijara. There's also commodity. There are a lot of istisnas that have been going on around commodities. I'm not sure if FX does, but I know that the owner of FX is a very staunch Muslim, and I think I tried to research if they have Islamic product around commodities trading. I didn't get that, but you can also check FX. And I think you have Mabu Capital. Mabu Capital also does a lot of Islamic investment advisory. They do advisory, and I know that they also do a lot of, I don't know if they have mutual fund. There's this lady on Instagram, I came across her. Her handle is Alal Investing Mom. So she does a lot of education, advocacy, and then investment, Alal investment options as well on her page. So you can check her out. I don't know her. And I mean, just by way of reading, I also came across, I follow her page. So we've moved beyond the restricted Alal investment options in Nigeria to now more, the options are now out there. I think Cowrywise also has Alal investment options on their page. Cowrywise also has. There are a lot of more investors. So we are not restricted to just saying that because Nigeria deals a lot more with the conventional financial products, we can't, make Alal investments. So, but I think before you even go to start checking the investment options that you have, you must build your own individual investment policy statements that guides everything that I've done around your risk tolerance, your time horizon, your liquidity needs, your return expectation, the phase of life that you are in now, understanding the concept of diversification. Cryptocurrency, I intentionally mentioned cryptocurrency because I know it's very controversial. I read an article where the Council of, I don't know what they call them in Malaysia, did outrightly say that cryptocurrency was haram. But I also have read some other articles where, neither you're there, there's been no clear outright dismissal of it. But for me, mentioning it here is to call our attention to the fact that if there's anything you're going to invest in, ensure that you have an understanding of it. You must understand the value chain of what you are investing in. I spoke to a young lady recently, and she said, okay, so I was asking her about her savings, how was last year and all that. And she said, there's just something I can't tell you, but I think I have to tell you, I invested in crypto and I lost a lot of money. And I said, how much of that money? She said, no, I don't want to tell you the value involved. So if you're going to go, crypto for me, following the article that I read on from Malaysia, is totally haram. For the other ones, if you decide to read the other articles, are neither here or there, you must have a full understanding of what you want to invest in, understand the value chain, understand how it works, and ensure that you're not just investing because people are investing in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Jazakallah khairan. Mr. Abdulmalik, would you like to mention something briefly before we move to the question and answer session?
I'm not sure how much time have we got left. Another 10, 15 minutes?
We are past time for the session. We're supposed to be taking the question and answers now. But since I do not have questions per se, so.
Do you have any questions?
Minutes.
Do you have any questions that are directed at me? I can just make a couple of comments.
Okay. I'll just go through the to the chat box. So someone said that you mentioned something about after age 7 for children, you lose the influence over your child to others. Do you have a reference for that, please?
Yeah, so there's some social studies that have been done on that, but I actually got that figure initially from, there's a book by Al-Ghazali called Disciplining the Soul and Breaking the Two Desires. It's by Islamic Text Society. So at the beginning of that book, there is a long introduction into the concept of discipline. And it's mentioned there actually. So that's where I actually got that information from. Yeah. So it's from one of the scholars. He mentioned that about the concept of how it varies. It's talking about the concept of how to raise children Islamically. And it's just talking about how the most important part is the first 7 years. I think there's also something, I'm not sure if it's a hadith or, I can't remember if it's a hadith, I don't want to misquote, but the first 7 years is very important because in fact, in terms of, scientists have now said that now, but we already knew that from over 1400 years ago, that the first 7 years is where the mind is building up rationally. I mean, it gets to 7 to 14, the rational mind begins to take more over. So that's why you see that if you have kids, they start to ask you or start to challenge you when they start getting to that age. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why can't we do it that way? Because the brain is beginning to develop differently. So the first 7 years is always like almost one-way traffic. If you ask your child to do this, yeah, they'll ask a question, why is this, why is this? Whatever you tell them, they'll accept it. Whatever mommy and daddy say is correct. When they start getting over 7 years old, they start to say, oh, why is it like that? It's because the brain is developing differently. And that's why traditionally in the first 7 years, the concept was that the mother should be the predominant caregiver in terms of teaching the child the part to do with love and emotion. And then 7 to 14, the next 7 years is where they say, okay, the dad kind of gets more involved. Also relates to concept, I mean, it's just based on some of the tafsir. So if you remember when Ibrahim was with Ishmael, apparently said that was because he started walking with his father. That means he was between 7 to 14. And in fact, when he tried to sacrifice him, he was already a young teenager. It's not like in images you might have seen in books that says that he was an adult. He wasn't. He was 7 to 14. He was walking with his dad. So that's just based on that concept of 0 to 7 and then 7 to 14, the rational brain taking over. And of course, especially in society where your children tend to get more exposed when they're going into now primary schools. The end of primary school, beginning of secondary school, obviously they're going to spend more time with other people and they're going to be more aware of what's happening in society as well. That's why that first 7 years is really important. There's also been some recent studies that says that it's not actually, people thought that it's just hanging out with your kids between 7 years old. It's actually to do with the words. So there's another study, and I can't remember the reference, that says the more your children hear your voice and hear the words, it actually helps in terms of developing their intellectual capacity. So that's why that first 7 years is very, very critical.
Okay, so the next question is directed to you, Mr. Abdulmalik. So when you're talking about self-leadership, you related it to the prophet. And so the person is asking you to please repeat the hadith on a journey related to leadership.
Yeah, there's a famous hadith by the Prophet where he says, on a journey, a leader is the servant of the people. So for example, the concept of whenever you go on a journey, Islamically, it's supposed to be one person you elect as the leader of the journey. And that person is supposed to take care of everybody. You know, even if you look at the concept of civil servant, that means they're supposed to serve the public, not themselves. You know, the concept is that whoever is in charge of the public is a servant to the people. So, you know, that's a famous hadith that says that basically leadership is supposed to be servants. And it goes back to the concept of, you know, why every prophet is supposed to have been a shepherd, because basically they're serving the flock, they're looking after the flock, they're taking care of the flock, and they're making the flock, they're giving the flock the priority over themselves. Of course, it does not diminish the character of the servant, because the first leader was Prophet Sallallahu, and of course he had the best character. So it's relating to that concept of understanding who you are, that you're serving the people that are around you. Even if you're a leader of an organization or of your family, the interest is for you to serve the interests of those people that you're leading, not yourself. So make sure that if you're in a company that, in terms of profit sharing, you're trying to make sure you look after those people that are working for you, because they also have families, they also have responsibilities, to make sure that they're also looked after and that you're in charge of them. But you're serving them, basically, you're basically the servant of those people.
Okay, so this can be for either of the speakers first. As a Muslim, at what point do you become contented with your goals or desire to be successful? So, Sister Aisha, would you want to go first?
I think I can allow Brother Abdulmalik to take that, and then I would.
Okay.
I can chip in if there is need to.
Okay, that's fine.
So just clarify. So the question, basically, as a Muslim, where would you be content with your goals? Is that the question?
Sorry, I'll just scroll back. Also, the person is saying, as a Muslim, at what point do you become contented with your goals or your desire to be successful?
Yeah, I think, well, there's been a lot of debate about this. So, there's a lot of rhetoric about everybody should be happy. That's the goal of life. I actually think that everybody should be content with whatever they have. What I mean by that is that no matter what you try and do, and don't get me wrong, you should always have goals, you should always have success criteria. That's what Sister Aisha mentioned. Success criteria should be built on what matters to you, not what everybody says that you should be. You shouldn't use other people's criteria to judge your success, for example, or you have to be a millionaire or a billionaire as a success, or you have to have the 5-bedroom villa and German cars in your parkway. No, this would not be your criteria. You should use your criteria based on what really matters to you. And if what really matters to you is basically your own personal development as a Muslim, everything should be rooted in that as a basis, for example. So the reason why I love the concept of contentment, it also goes back to the concept of what Islam is. Islam means you will basically find peace when you submit to Allah's will. So it's all about submission. And Allah is saying that peace will only come when you do that. So basically, no matter what you try and do, if you're content, okay, all I try to do is I try to do that, I make dua to you, but this is what happened. But I'm doing that because I know that you know what's best for me. So then you'll be blessed with that sakina, that contentment. That's what I sincerely believe. Is rather than trying to think that success lies in your hand alone, which is obviously another rhetoric that comes from the Western concept, that success belongs to you, you're in charge of your success. I remember I was on a call once and a lady was talking about how she became successful in her life because of the things that she did and how she rejected certain things. And I said to her, I understand what you're saying, but for me, based on my faith, the success only comes from one source. You will be motivated to do certain things. But I find contentment in knowing that I am not fully in control of everything that I do. I have a limit. I don't even know if I'm going to survive the next 1 minute or the next 1 hour. There's something I can do about that. So just being content with where you are and content with whatever Allah does. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. Don't get me wrong. Do your bit, but whatever the success happens or whatever the criteria happens, you accept that that's what Allah wanted for you. So I think in the end, every Muslim should work towards being content with their life and what they have. And the most important gift, of course, is Islam and understanding what your relationship is with Allah and everybody else.
So be content where you are, basically. Sister Aisha, so someone is talking about forex investments. And they said, are there halal forex investment options that we can invest in, considering the fluctuating value of the naira? If there are or if there is, sorry, please give suggestions. Sorry.
Okay, so when I saw this question, I wasn't sure what this person really wanted. So I'm sure that you would have heard the concept of forex trading that is being advertised everywhere. For me, I don't understand the forex trading they do that they advertise. I don't, and I know people who've been beaten, lost their money to it. I don't advise that. But if it's that it relates to the current FX situation in Nigeria, where you have a source that you can get dollars from, and then you can sell. For me, I think that is an option. And I mean, from the economics of the trading itself, I don't see anything that could be around in that aspect. So let me break it down very well. If, for instance, I have a friend that works in the US, and she is in constant need of Naira, and she doesn't want to stress herself about how she's going to sell the Naira or whatever it is. I can also then get somebody here who needs dollars and say to the person, I'm getting Naira at this value, and I'm going to sell to you at this value. The person may be propelled to buy from me because they don't know any other source that they're going to get the dollar. And so maybe my commission on the entire trade could be 0.5. I then do that trading, that is fine. But if the person is speaking about the forex trading that they advertise, that they say they do, that you have to learn and you have to give people your money to do forex trading for you and all that, I don't know any halal investment options in that area. And it's not something that I understand. And I know very well people within my circle who've gotten into such investments and they've lost their money. They've lost their capital. So I think that would be my response for that question.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, ma'am. So before we go, we have 2 minutes to close in. I am so sorry. We would not be taking all of the questions because we have just 2 minutes to go. So Mr. Abdulmalik or Mr. So like Mr. Abdulmalik, sorry, to give us a closing prayer. And then Sister Aisha, sorry, can add to it.
So just before I start that, I just wanted to just mention something. I hope it won't be controversial. The purpose of this session was to do with 2023 goals. And if you notice, in terms of the Gregorian calendar, New Year starts after a concept of spirituality, whereas in Islam, we have that to do with Ramadan. So usually I tend to focus on my spiritual goals after Ramadan, because Ramadan is a concept of spirituality and cleansing yourself. And in fact, it says Ramadan is preparation for the year coming ahead. So what I would like to say is that just for people to rethink that in terms of making goals, I think it'll be best to do it as close as possible to after Ramadan, because you've been through that spiritual cleanse, you've really come to learn a lot more about yourself. That's what Ramadan does as well. If you follow it constantly, you actually learn more about yourself. You've given up yourself, you're sacrificing. So I just wanted to add that before I go into a short prayer. So I start off with Fatiha. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Thank you, Allah, for letting us be here together. Our most important intention is to serve you, and we ask for your guidance and your mercy in what we do. Help us to have a correct intention to glorify and praise you, for us to find the greatest delight and comfort in our heart in glorifying and praising your worship in all we do and all we say. Our intention always be rooted in what is best for our present life, our future life, our life in the hereafter. You know what's best for us, we don't. You have more than we don't. Help us put our trust into your hands, Tawakkul, because you know what's best for us and we don't. Help us be content with whatever you decree. And we ask for you, ask to bask in your mercy and your blessing in this life and in the next. Amen.
Jazakallah khairan. Sister Aisha, would you like to?
Yes, so just before I say a prayer, I just wanted to say that, there was an exercise that I did earlier on this year that I'd never done before. And, what I did was to print out my bank statements, and I did a thorough analysis of what my last year's spendings were. And I did it from a backdrop was over time, we use our gut feelings and, historical wisdom to think that when we're starting out at the beginning of the year, we would always, rock our way through the year. And that analysis did give me a lot of insight into what I had no clue that I had even done myself. And I think is what I would also tell people to do. I also wanted to, in between, mention that, in terms of contentment, right? I always fall back on this saying that I always want the best of both worlds. So I know that our key goal in life is to race towards our journey of Firdaus. And what we constantly say is that whatever our actions, our words, our deeds are, it should align to what Allah has ordained us to, to carry out. The other bit is the dunya that we consistently, keep chasing. And there are quite a bit of prayers that I do, and I think the one that is consistent is the one about the story of Abu Umama, where he was in the mosque and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was asking him that, why is he always in the mosque when it's not even the time of prayer? And he said to him that he wanted a prayer to ease his debts, to take care of his worries, and also take away his troubles. And I always find that prayer very, very handy. There was another one that came handy as it relates to, even if you have a mountain, as high, if your debt is as high as a mountain, there's always a prayer that, that was also released for that. So I consistently say all of this prayer because sometimes you budget and the budget is not budgeting, or the calculating is not calculating together. And these prayers, I've always they've come really handy for me. So on that note, I will thank Almighty Allah that we did pick date and we are all here alive to witness this day. I pray that whatever we've said today, Almighty Allah will forgive us if there's any areas in it that we've heard. It would also put barakah in the ones that we've shared with ourselves and continue to help us, elevate us, guide us, and be with our family always as we go back to our life. Every action, words, and deeds that we do will constantly align to what Allah has ordained us, to do. And I pray that inshallah we'll continue to, be in the perfect, oaths and guidance of Almighty Allah, both us and our family, inshallah. Thank you for having me on the mic. Thank you. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you so much to both of our speakers. Jazakumullah khairan for honoring our invite and for the intense session. I learned a lot about finance and also about self-leadership. And then our audience as well as saying Jazakumullah khairan. So thank you so much. To the audience, we apologize for taking extra 4 minutes of your time. I would also like for you to stay back for the happy hour session, kindly, if you'd like to. But for now, we'll be saying bye to our speakers. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Assalamu alaikum. Bye.
Assalamu alaikum. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Aisha and then Brother Malik.
Thank you, Brother Rashid.
Thank you.
All right. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Zainab, are you here, please?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
I can hear you actually.
Okay, it looks like my speaker is a bit low, so I don't know if you can hear me.
I think I can hear you clearly.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Zainab Moshood. I'm the Community Engagement Officer for MICA. If you can kindly switch on your camera and your mic, I'm guessing everyone should be able to unmute their mics now. We would love to meet everyone. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you kindly unmute your mic?
Zainab, apologies, but I think I'd have to run now. I need to.
Yes, no problem. Thank you so much. Mr. Taiwo Popola, Mr. Zaid Ibrahim, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you kindly unmute your mics? I would like to hear from you. Miss Miriam Lawal, Mr. Ismail Ogunlano, Miss Shakira Tolaiton, Onosonya, yes. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Are you here with me? You can as well put your salam in the chat box if you are unable to unmute your mic, or if you don't want to unmute your mic. I just want to know if everyone is with me. Miss Azizat Mohammed, Assalamu alaikum, ma. Mr. Sulaiman, I see you're trying to say something.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing this afternoon?
Alhamdulillah, fine.
Alhamdulillah. Miss Miriam Lawal, assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam to you too. Thank you so much. I can see your salam in the chat box. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a really interesting session for me. I'm sure it should be a very interesting session for you as well. If you don't mind, please can you at today's session? It will be a really great feedback for our programmers in the house to inform us for further program designs. So if you can unmute yourself and tell us what your biggest takeaway is for today's session. If you would like to say something and you do not want to unmute yourself, you can as well send it into the chat box. That is also acceptable, but we would like to really hear from you. We're so grateful that you could make today's session, and we're so happy to have every one of us here today. Please, we would like to hear what your biggest takeaway was at today's session, if you don't mind. I'll start from myself. I'll start with myself rather. One of the questions that I actually thought the speakers were going to touch on, but because of the time, they couldn't, is how to stop procrastinating. I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that, with procrastination, so to say. And for me, one of the things that I do to curb that is once I have it, I do it. I try to do it as soon as I have it. But that could also be a problem, because then if I don't know how to prioritize and how to manage time, I can have a whole lot of things piled up for me that I have to do at the very instant. So is there anyone that would love to also share what their biggest takeaway was for today? Mr. Sulaiman. Oh, Miss Miriam Lawal. Yes, Mr. Taiwo, I can hear you.
My biggest takeaway is the aspect of contentment after you've done your best in setting your goals. And if you were able to achieve that goal, alhamdulillah, but if not, you believe that Allah is in total control of one's success. He wants to be contented with what he achieves.
Mr. Sulaiman, I'm so sorry. I can barely hear you. I don't know if it's only me.
Okay, can you hear me
Anyone
now?
else hear Mr.
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, mashallah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I said one of my biggest takes is being contented with what the results you have in success on your failures. But after you set a goal and maybe you achieve that, alhamdulillah, and if you didn't achieve it, alhamdulillah, because you just have to put in your best, or that success comes with Allah's blessings, not no effort alone. That's one of my biggest things.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Sulaiman. Also, okay, yes, I can hear you. Would you still like to say anything?
No, that's all for now.
Okay, thank you so much. Jazakumullah khairan for sharing your biggest takeaway. May Allah bless. Miss Miriam Lawal, I see you put your own biggest takeaway in the chat box. I'm just going to read it out. Thank you so much for also participating in this. Jazakumullah khairan. Miss Miriam Lawal said that the topic and the session was good. Important takeaway is to be determined and remain focused. Have short goals to measure milestones and long-term goals. Jazakumullah khairan for sharing that. I actually totally agree with you. To have short goals that you can easily measure. If your goals is becoming too broad and too wide, it's easier to get lost in what you are trying to achieve and get redirected. And at the end of the day, you find yourself at the base. You start from base one. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us today. We appreciate your contribution, your participation, and we look forward to having you in our next session next Sunday, inshallah. I hope that everyone will have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week ahead. May Allah bless everyone abundantly. Thank you so much once again. I'm going to say the closing prayer and then we'll close the floor, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. جزاكم الله خيرا, everyone. Have a wonderful week ahead. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.